Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a really cool video today. It's actually piggybacking a little bit off of a video I recently did that everybody enjoyed when I interviewed Steve McCormack and his experience purchasing the Sourcepoint 10 Mofi speakers by Andrew Jones and his experience with them in the initial impressions. He's back today in a Zoom interview to give some further follow-up and more accolades to share with you guys, because I know that's a very hot topic and that video was enjoyed by many and people liked his insights. But to piggyback on that in general, I'm getting his insights today on two other topics. Number one being the Stax DAC that I bought from him, the X1-T, that legendary piece from the 1990s that I bought from him. I released a video earlier this week on my impression, showcasing it a little bit. You may want to check out that. But also somebody that actually bought it originally, not at the time at retail, but he bought it from a gentleman knowing the pedigree behind it. He's owned it for a lot longer than I have, only a few days, and he can tell you a little bit more, being a designer himself, what special qualities that Stax DAC had, even to this day in performance, why it's still so special. For again, everything in audio is taste profile, but for both him and I, and what we look for in a DAC especially, that's sometimes where you don't always want to look at measurements alone and signal to noise ratio. Back in the 90s, they were able to accomplish a lot of objective measurements that met the threshold of hearing. It's a lot of other things that we're going to get into today that make the difference in really when you want to hear the difference in a DAC. I find it a lot harder with modern day DACs, especially two solid state DACs. You have to almost strain to hear oftentimes the difference, and certainly not huge difference one way or the other. But getting a headphone rig and this Stax DAC compared to some modern day DACs that I was using in that same rig, night and day difference. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that and Steve's experience, but also Steve has had a lot of experience with grounding boxes, and I'm going to probably be auditioning a grounding box that I hinted at probably 6-8 months ago when I visited the gentleman in Sacramento who was building his own grounding box. He mentioned sending me a prototype to AB and demo, but really wanted to get a little more thoughts on grounding boxes, why they would even work, is there any science behind it, and Steve's impressions from building our gear and having a mind that is built on circuits and design and parts, but also trusting his ears too. What has he found with grounding boxes, and should I actually pursue this or not? Spoiler alert, I am, but here is another person's perspective who's been in the hobby for a long time, has seen the snake oil and non-snake oil, and thought his impressions may be worthwhile sharing with you on top of mine in the near future. So without further ado, let's get started with the Zoom interview with Steve McCormack. And then also I have one of my members there for Q&A who joined. And another little quick plug, Steve McCormack's in the, if you join the membership section and get into the WhatsApp group where there's a link as soon as you join, you get access to Steve, myself, the guys at 3MA, Rex the electrician, and a bunch of other audiophiles on a daily basis where we're doing similar to what you see in this Zoom interview. We're talking about topics almost daily, almost hourly on certain things, sometimes fun things, sometimes controversial things. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to join the channel. After you subscribe, there should be a join button in YouTube. So without further ado, though, let's get to the Zoom interview today with Steve. But I guess what I wanted to talk to you first about was piggybacking on what was really a great video the last time we had a Zoom with the source points. And you were remarking in a phone call we had yesterday that you're having even more fun with the source points. And
yeah, really enjoying them as I get to know them better. Just they continue to impress the heck out of me. Really remarkable speaker and very, very capable. Amazing dynamics. Bass is incredible for, they just, the bass is somehow unexpected, even though it's larger than regular bookshelf. If you call it a bookshelf speaker, as you do see some people doing, that's misleading, I believe. It makes you, visualize something that's modestly sized. This is a big speaker. They are nearly 50 pounds a piece, and and really substantially built, very heavy cabinet, super thick walls and bracing. So I have them on some stands, and I'm still waiting for the dedicated stands. I'm told that those are supposed to be available sometime this month, but I'm looking forward to getting the real stands, and that should be even a further improvement. The stands I have are okay for the moment, but they're not as good as they could be. Nevertheless, they keep impressing the heck out of me, like I've said, and just the focus, clarity, definition, everything really about them is outstanding. We've spoken about the differences in how they kind of launch music into the room compared to a speaker like your open baffles or a minimal baffle type design, where the tweeter and mid-range are pretty well out in the open with very small baffle surface behind them, or any sort of dipole, planar. All of those things have a very different kind of character of how they launch sound into the room, and they produce a very big, dimensional open sound. It's very spacious, which I know we both like a lot. That's something that I really enjoy. Now the Sourcepoints don't do exactly that, and you have this coaxial driver system with the tweeter mounted concentrically with the 10-inch woofer. So it's a little more directional, but still very room filling. And as I said, it's one where it makes you want to get down, in the sweet spot, get in the right place. And when you're there, it's really pretty amazing. Incredible resolution. I mean, they tell you everything about what you're listening to. I've been using them now in the system that I use to evaluate equipment that I'm working on. And they reveal those differences immediately, very obviously. I've done some experiments with different speaker cables. Those differences are immediately clear. So yeah, it's like they tell you very much, which, it's a double-edged sword, right? As long as everything's working well and you have a good source and all of that, you're going to hear amazing sound.
Right.
But I can see where the possibility exists where if you're using, if you don't have the right matchup of equipment, if the synergy isn't working well, then you may not be so happy with the results. And I don't have any further experience with using different amplifiers. I'm using my own amplifiers, and they're working real well. We have, that one experience from that one YouTube reviewer who started out with a Luxman integrated amp and was not happy, even though this is a very high-end kind of integrated amplifier that he liked very well with other equipment. But somehow that was not a happy matchup with the Sourcepoints. So I'm not sure what to think about that, other than it's very responsive to the associated equipment. And if someone were to buy them and set them up and not be really thrilled with the sound, possibly look into, that matchup between the amplifier and how they're set up and where they are in the room. All of the usual sort of caveats apply. I guess my point is that they're very revealing of what they're connected to and very responsive to the equipment that they're connected with. But I'm enjoying them enormously. They are amazingly satisfying, largely because the bass end is just so good. And as I told you, even though I'm aware that there's information down below 30 hertz, et cetera, below where they're going, and some of the music I'm listening to, I know it has additional information down there, but I don't feel the lack. I don't feel like I'm missing it. The bass is just really satisfying. So I'm a happy owner.
Yeah, so I think
Uh,
one of the takeaways that we talked about was that since you've owned them, it's even kind of more of an incredible bargain because you kept on remarking still, you have to kind of remind yourself that it's only $3,700. And I think
yeah,
you touched on the part that I think is the secret of this speaker because so many bookshelves have great tweeters and can deliver clarity and detail and wow you in a certain respect. But they almost always never have the tonal balance such that they're missing enough of the bass that it becomes bright, fatiguing, or you know you're missing something at least. And you either need to add subs or something. What he did so well here is get enough of that low end. It may not go to 20 hertz. You may, you know, when I play some of those same songs in my room, I do notice the difference, but it's not such that you feel like you're not able to enjoy the song and you're not missing, it's not creating an imbalance such that
right.
it's just got that musicality. And yeah, it's revealing, and it did reveal at the show from the anecdotal reports I had from the hi-fi rows to the back. Yeah, I don't know what the deal was with that guy who said the Luxman didn't work with it, but in any case, um, I think what we're finding out is that this is a bargain speaker that most anybody in that certainly under $10,000 budget range should audition, and probably even higher, in my opinion, because in some respects, I think it's better than ones even higher than that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, it delivers an awful lot for the amount of money. And I've seen online comments people have made complaining about the cost and saying it's too expensive. So, all right, I guess the part of the high-end world that I normally inhabit, that's a very inexpensive product,
Right.
and it delivers incredible performance at that price point and beyond. So I have to kind of laugh when I see people complaining about it being too expensive. And okay, fine, if you want to shop at a lower price point, that's great. And I know there are some fine products out there at lower price points. So that's, actually, we can thank Andrew Jones for some of that as well, with like the ELAC line.
Right.
But there are other good examples. And if that fits your budget better, that's just fine. And there are, I think, some DIY type speakers. I know GR Research makes some kits that are, again, relatively inexpensive and deliver very high performance. I don't really know how they compare because I haven't heard them in person. You might have a better idea, Jason, than I do. All I can really tell you is that the Sourcepoint 10s have impressed the heck out of me and continue to do so. So the only, caveat, so to speak, is that they are very revealing. And so you do hear everything about the source material and all the associated equipment.
Yeah, so if anybody's watching this Zoom without hearing the full Zoom interview we did with Steve and my report and the Andrew Jones demo, all of that's on my channel. I would encourage you, if you're considering the Sourcepoint 10, to watch my demo that Andrew Jones did. The interview with Andrew Jones was very revealing, giving you a little bit of history what went into that and some of the value added. And also Steve's firsthand impressions went into more detail. The purpose of this Zoom wasn't really just to do Sourcepoint. We did want to get that follow-up from him since he is enjoying it. But there was another thing that I'm releasing a video on, and it's actually in the back behind my shoulder here.
What is that back there, Jason?
I don't know. You actually know more about it than me. I've only had it for like 24 hours, but I'm super enthused about what I've been hearing. I was trying to play this Zoom with the Stax headphones and that DAC.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom wasn't cooperating, but I've been playing all my YouTube playlists through that DAC, and it's evident.
Why don't you back up just a little bit and turn so we can see that better? Yeah. Okay. So there's the DAC, the Stax DAC.
This is about 40, 50 pounds, the size and weight heft of an amplifier, easy. Yeah, this thing is seriously well built. In the other video I filmed of my impressions, I put some internal pictures of it, and I think was it around $30,000 back in?
No, it was just over 20,000. I think it was 20,500 when it came out in 1989. And then I'm a little hazy on the history. I think it stayed at that price point for some period of time, a few years. I believe there was a point in time when the price did drop. I do not know the details of why, but I assume, I'm making a guess, that they had some additional stock that they wanted to move. And so I think the price dropped to like 12.5 at some point. But as I say, that's a long time ago, and my memory on that is not clear. But when it came out, definitely 20,500. So this is in 1989. So it was really striking when that appeared. It's definitely a luxury class product, and the Stax engineers just went all out to make the very, very best product that they could, using the best parts and techniques. The build quality is amazing. I was friends with the Stax distributor at the time. It was run by Mike Detmer here in the U.S. And in fact, I had a store then, Music by the Sea, and we were a Stax dealer. But I was more interested in the speakers, the electrostatic speakers, the F81 and F83, I think. But we did the Stax headphones as well. But then along came the Stax, and it was amazing and terribly impressive, and just a tour de force technologically for the day. It was still dedicated to CD effectively, although you could do DAT, say, as well, but 16-bit up to 48K. But man, they knocked it out of the park using these ultra analog discrete DACs, and the blocks that are in there, these sealed blocks. That was a 20-bit DAC, and one of the very few, maybe one of the only DACs outside of the military at the time that could make a legitimate claim to achieving 20-bit resolution. And their argument, which I think still is fair, is that if you wanted to really hear all the 16 bits that were on the CD, you needed that extra resolution, that higher level of resolution, to actually be able to deliver all the linearity that you needed to get the full benefit of a 16-bit recording. And then, of course, it has a hybrid, well, it's a tube output stage that's driven by MOSFETs. Pardon. But effectively, there's a tube, a pair of 12AX7s providing the analog output in a balanced configuration. So you have balanced and unbalanced. And it's incredible. So I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to get one of those, not at the time that it came out, but years later. I was able to pick up this piece that you've got, and I enjoyed it for a long time. And it was only as I did the development work on my own DAC that I ultimately set it aside, put the Stax aside, and really just settled on listening to my own. But I've always had a real love affair with that DAC. So as you know, I wasn't like in a hurry to get rid of it. But when you explained your goals and what you were shooting for, I thought, okay, I guess I'm willing to let it go.
At least get it some use.
Yeah. And it is just an absolutely stunningly beautiful piece of equipment. And it's one of those things that the closer you get to it, the better it looks. All of the details are wonderful. And this was, I have to say, as an aside, that was very frustrating for me, because remember, at the time, McCormack Audio was a fairly young enterprise. We'd evolved from the Mod Squad into the business of McCormack Audio. And I was producing certainly nothing in that price range, but I had a line of preamplifiers, and the amp was just about to come out. The DNA1 was just about out at that point in time, not quite. But I was learning about making chassis, metalwork, faceplates, what finishes to use. all of these things that go into that, and there's just this unbelievably long list of details that go into any product like that. And then I was running into the limitations of the resources that I had access to locally in California and the United States as a whole, of what kind of metal processing you could have done and what kind of anodizing, for instance, other finishes, that sort of thing. And it was very frustrating to be constantly trying to achieve a better result and not having people that could deliver those sorts of things. So then suddenly you go and you look at this Stax DAC, and okay, it's very expensive, you bet, but the quality of all of the parts, metalwork, circuit boards, I mean, literally everything that's in it was just the best. And the quality of the finish is very, very impressive. You see that kind of thing more routinely these days. So unless you have that background, you may not be as impressed by seeing the Stax DAC. But I remember looking at even some details about the engraving on the front. This is at CES in 1989 when this thing came out. And I remember coming right up to it and looking very carefully because I was interested in having engraving work done, and I couldn't find anybody who could do it well. And here is this example of this piece from Japan that's just perfect. All of the machining that goes into the engraving and the lettering was just absolutely crisp, clean, no machining, tooling marks left behind. I mean, it was, as I say, it was both educational and frustrating.
Well, again, here's a good chance to compare it to what many people think is one of the best looking head amps out there right now. This Blue Hawaii, I got the champagne finish, which actually is fairly
yeah, it's a decent match.
Well.
Yeah,
and it doesn't stand out as a 30-plus-year-old piece in comparison. The build quality and comparison to modern day standards really works pretty amazingly. That it stood the test of time, and even the feet, super huge feet. It's got the 3 power cords underneath where you have to use right angle. And that was probably because they wanted to minimize the distance to the IEC in the back, or what do you think was the reasoning?
Well, that was sort of my best guess. When you'll put up some pictures of the internal layout, but when you see the layout, it's left and right channel processing is all separate with separate power supplies, and then the digital part of it is also separated. So each of those gets its own power cord feed, its own separate transformer. And so I think that by putting the connectors, the IEC connectors underneath, they could put them right adjacent to each power transformer involved, so that the wiring to bring power into the transformers was very short. So the feet, as you know, they're fairly tall feet to allow for power cords to come in from underneath. But even so, you have to have the right angle connectors, or else you've got to do something else to lift it up even higher to get standard power cords in there.
Yeah, I used 3 power cords, but you had created this.
Yeah, I made a little adapter really for convenience, to let you do, experiment with power cords and whatnot. But I thought I'd throw that in, so if you needed it, you'd have that extra convenience factor.
Yeah, I plan to do that in the future. But I tell you what, talking about the sound, I went into a separate video where it's probably going to be released before this video, where I talk about the sound. But maybe from your perspective and what you thought was kind of the unique unicorn level that this DAC was able to achieve, which I think is synonymous with what I heard.
Well, we've talked about this a bit, and I have my feelings, my perspective, both as a designer and as a music lover, about digital audio. And I've spent an awful lot of time creating CD players and my own D to A converter, trying to get the kind of performance sonically that I was interested in. My feeling about this is that you really need to let go of this fixation on or demand for high resolution digital playback beyond 16-bit and 44 or 48K. That having higher resolution recordings, digital recordings, is fine, but in the end, when you're playing these things back, to me, what was important was these musical values. And I often talk about the sense of flow, or what people refer to as Pratt, pace, rhythm, and timing. And I find most of the digital playback gear that I hear, that I listen to, and I'm aware of, doesn't deliver that sense of musical flow and timing in the way that I want to hear. So I work hard to deliver that from my own CD players and DAC. But the Stax just does that so beautifully. And so it sounds like music to me. It sounds musically right and engaging. So when I listen to music, playback through that, you're interested in the music. You're not concerned about resolution or bit depth or details of technical aspects of the recording. You're hearing the music, and really, it's not. I don't feel the loss of anything. All the spatial details, cues, resolution, transient definition, all of that sounds excellent. Bass sounds, very, very good. So those are the things that are important to me, the values that I value, the values that I value, excuse me. But so with this piece, you have to set your server to limit the word length to 16-bit, and then you can do either 44.1K or 48K, whichever seems to work, out best for you. But so then you should be able to play pretty much any file. I guess DSD would have to be converted to PCM in your server.
Right.
But ultimately, then you can deliver a bit stream from pretty much any source to the DAC and hear those qualities from it. And I know some people will, be concerned about the fact that you're giving up a certain amount of resolution. And if you're playing back a, 24-bit 192K or DSD file, et cetera. But what's more important, that you're hearing literally every last, tiny, tiny detail, or that it delivers a musical experience that's really engaging. So ultimately, to me, that the musicality was the more important factor.
Yeah, I was actually expecting some loss of resolution or something based on the age of the DAC and tube, and then I'm also using toss link. So everything from the primitive generalizations people have, I was expecting something a lot different than what I heard. And the opposite actually was the case in terms of the amount of resolution is much better than even with this exact same setup otherwise with the benchmark DAC, which really blew my mind, because on an objective metric basis, the benchmark was a reference, and even John Atkinson was using it as his reference for many years. So this kind of is a little bit telling from the objective subjective. I'm normally in the objective camp because you got something you can hang your hat on, and I definitely want something that is engineered to certain standards. But let me tell you, if you want to know the difference between a DAC, most DACs nowadays sound the same and have a lot very minor sound signatures, especially when you put it in a room with floor standing speakers and a lot of other variables mitigate and mask some of those differences. Put headphones like the Stax on, Blue Hawaii, this compared to the benchmark, they're not even close. I mean, it's so different in sounding, and so much in terms of every metric better here. Now, I did think at first it almost sounded a little more muted, dark. But what I realized is that as I listened to recordings and heard more detail and even ran test tones, I mean, I was getting 30 hertz clear as day through the Stax, and then all the way up to 19,000 hertz. At least that's what it said it was playing. I didn't think I could even hear that much anymore. Certainly in my main rig, I couldn't hear those tones. But in any case, I was getting detail in actual music and from the level of just test tones alone. Amazing performance from that DAC. And like you say, it's the musicality, and the Pratt thing is something that gets a lot of controversy. How can you change the timing, pace, rhythm of music? But I think what I have tied it to is that, and I think I shared this with you, a lot of DACs and a lot of modern day equipment have that transient overload. It's everything is into that initial transient, and it's a lot of times with the tweeters and even headphones, it becomes ultra etched, and your brain processes that so much, and you miss so much of the micro and nuances after that. And so much of the Pratt feeling and way you contextualize it is when you don't have that hyper etched transient overload, and you get all of that. It provides a realism that I think gets translated to the word Pratt. It just sounds real, the pace, and it doesn't sound like a speaker in a stereo system where everything is etched in short bursts, and something that transistors, now your equipment doesn't have that issue, but a lot of cheaper transistors, cheaper headphones, cheaper solid state amps for headphones, I'm very commonly hear it, that the transient overload is what this doesn't have, and makes it so much better than the benchmark, in my opinion. But also another thing I was thinking about, I didn't mention this to you when we talked, but there was everybody thinks that there's an increase over time with digital getting better, and certainly by objective standpoints and signal to noise ratios, that is. But we've already surpassed what we could hear signal to noise ratio in DACs many years ago.
Yeah.
So judging a DAC on that criteria, I'm not in the objectivist camp at all, because it's irrelevant. But one thing that was really quite good back in the day were these chips, like this ultra analog chip that was in here. Anagram was in the Audio Aero, the Audio Mecca. Those were phenomenal CD players back in the day. And the Anagram, unfortunately, chip, that company went out of business, and I guess they don't make the ultra analog anymore. But some things went backwards, and we got cheaper chips, and we got less quality from an audio perspective over time. And so it's primitive to just think, oh yeah, we've advanced in digital. Sometimes the legacy chips that they used here were better for audiophile purposes and on a lot of sound metrics that I think people don't remember, that, or that weren't in the hobby back then, that could hear it, because it's not that much better today. And in many cases, it's worse, as I can show right clear as day with this piece now.
You remind me that there's in the background throughout all of the years, the intervening years, there have always been a few voices saying that the earlier 16-bit chips used in a non-oversampling DAC were still the best musically around. And so there are people today making ultra high-end DACs with the best of everything around these parts, still using the Philips TDA 1541A 16-bit ladder DAC in a non-oversampling arrangement, and it's just, that's the best. No reason to go beyond that. And I'm not going to argue the point. In fact, I tend to agree that, again, because they're more interested in the core musical values and how engaged you are with the sound that you're getting and the music you're listening to, rather than the specs per se, the resolution as such. So there's those are ultimately, I guess, I mean, to me, those are the most important things. It's how you like your music, how well you like it when you want to sit and listen to tunes.
Well, one thing I did want to get I gave a little bit in my video, but a lot of people also have preconceived notions, like I talked about with DAC chips over the years advancing, maybe not so, but also with a predisposition against Toslink. But I'm using Toslink here, and I've found over the years that there are definite applications for Toslink that makes it a better interface than coax and even USB. In this case, it sounds phenomenal. I haven't done an AB yet, but you were echoing at the distance I'm running as well that you think the Toslink is the no-brainer solution.
Yeah, you're running a long cable from your server to the DAC, and that really doesn't seem to work out very well with coaxial cables, the actual physical cables. That's less true with AES EBU, that you can be more successful, but that's not an option here anyway. But you got a glass fiber Toslink cable to make that connection, and that worked extremely well. And of course, you don't have any issues of any ground interactions. It's galvanically isolated, and it's immune to other kinds of electromagnetic sorts of interference. And Stax was using the best Toslink receivers available at the time, and they hold up quite well.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it on right now, and I've got the Stax here. I mean, I could turn the volume all the way up on this Blue Hawaii, and even on the mic on here. I mean, there's nothing, which I was quite impressed with, having two pieces, and then I thought for sure I might have a noise floor issue. So
be sure to turn that volume knob back down.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to Cardi B. I'm fine.
Okay.
Quick aside story. I was in Cabo. We were on a boat. They let me take over the playlist on the boat. Started playing Cardi B, and the whales started jumping. Very rare to see the whales, even when you
getting out of there as fast as they could.
Yeah, they were like, "I'm out of here." Actually, they say that when they're jumping, that's when they're trying to mate and do their little showcase.
Oh,
dance.
well, okay,
So
there you
who
go.
knows?
Perfect.
In any case, it
example.
provided good luck. Hopefully, next time I'm going to do it when we go fishing, because we had less success fishing, only one fish. But anyway, that kind of wraps up the Stax. I have a separate video with my thoughts, and certainly as I have more time with it, I might even put it in my main rig and do some comparisons, but I got a lot of other changes coming out there. I'm very happy with it here, and anybody that's in the area is welcome to come by and hear this, because this is not a piece that anybody, I think there's only, like they said, there's one of 100 of them out there or whatever, and probably how many are still,
Yeah, I do not know the numbers. It couldn't have been very many. So it's a rare piece. Yeah.
I think there was a lower model that came out that justified that lower price. It was hard to find any kind of details, because back in the 80s, you didn't have the internet. Nobody was archiving some of this stuff. So it's not easy to find on the internet. But in any case, it's very rare. Definitely something you guys want to check out if you're ever in the area of Houston. You're welcome to come by. And then when I get the X9000, which are even better headphones than these 009S, that's going to be phenomenal. Can't wait.
Yeah, you may finally persuade me to come and visit you in Houston.
Well, you're going to want to come for that Bach SP, for sure, which is coming soon. And speaking of which, Ryan's on the call. I'm going to let him jump in at this point too. Let me unmute him, because
I'm here now.
You can hear?
Yeah.
There you are.
You don't have your camera, so we'll just do audio. But based on what you've heard so far, Ryan, you can chime in at any point. But we're going to talk about grounding. Do you have any ground solution stuff, external products for grounding? I know you do a lot of tweaky stuff, Ryan, but I didn't know if you did anything on grounding.
No, I haven't gotten to the grounding deal. I was going to get to Robert's place there in California.
Okay.
Yeah, in Sacramento, and wasn't able to link up, around Christmas and holidays and everything. So outside of that, I haven't dug in any deeper. I do feel like it's something I want to explore, though. And so, because other than that, and the Stax, the Bach XP, SP, man, I'm super interested in that. That's really my next tweak focus is the Bach.
Yeah, that's what I would prioritize over everything. I mean, a great headphone rig, I will say, and I say this in the other video, is great for audiophiles regardless, even for your 2-channel floor standing room rig. A great headphone rig like this is invaluable at some point to get, because you are truly going to get everything that's on the recording. When you take the room out of the equation, when you have speakers with perfect impulse response, which headphones basically give you, lower distortion, no room reverberant impressions. Obviously, you don't get that acoustic wave, but so you may not prefer it over your room, but you're going to hear what's on the recording. And what's really fun is seeing how you can hear everything on the recording with the Stax and all the stuff that I have now, and then go to my main rig and see how close I can get to extracting that information, and how far away some of these floor standing speakers I listen to still are, despite the huge price tag. This gives you, in terms of a window on a performance, I know that's thinking that Steve talks about a lot, important to him.
Yeah.
This gives you that. No, I don't care if you have MBL extremes, even in an ideal room, you're not going to get it at the lowest distortion level, timing, taking the room totally out of the equation, and the level of detail that a great headphone rig would give you. Not these $200 headphones, but something that somebody should invest in. But other than that, the Bach SP is going to be very intriguing to a lot of people, but I don't want to spoil it and deviate too much on that. I did want to talk to Steve, because he's had experience with the grounding, and you've had interest in getting that grounding box from Robert. I'm going to be visiting him and probably getting one as well to try. But Steve, I mean, there isn't a lot of science behind justifying it, but kind of like we talked about with the DAC chip here, that, I mean, I'm open to some things not being verifiable. What is your basic impression with grounding boxes?
Well, I've put a good deal of effort into this myself in the recent years, and have a product called the AC Nexus, which is a power distribution and ground enhancing device. So it's sort of two things in one unit. It's really expensive to make, and the price tag is way high. So it's not a terribly practical thing. It was really me. It was an exercise in making the very best thing I could possibly think of for power distribution and grounding, and full Panzerholz chassis with special materials and damping internally, and the Furutech, duplex AC outlets, but also those are isolated mechanically, and then the whole grounding routine inside, which is, that's still kind of secret sauce for me. I did a lot of experiments leading up to that, and we've talked about my ground in a jar thing, which you've seen in pictures of stuff that I'm doing. That was a experiment with a big vitamin jar filled with a mix of materials to develop an electrolyte type, solution with high purity copper wires going down into it, and then coming out to a lead out that would be this, grounding device. They really do work in the sense that they make sonic improvements. Certainly in the ones that I've worked with, they're variable in their effect. They're even down to the wires you use to connect the grounding boxes have an effect, unfortunately. And silver is better than copper, so on and on it goes. But I hear the effects as being a reduced kind of noise floor in the system. All of the instrumental lines are revealed more clearly and cleanly. Dynamic expression, especially of micro scale dynamics, is improved because there's better system lucidity. Now, why is that? Exactly what's going on? I don't have any good explanation or anything that I could hang my hat on and say, yeah, this is why. And I think there are people who really would like to give an explanation of what they think is going on. Some of them may be right. I don't have any good way to judge. All I can tell you is that this idea has been kicking around for a long time. A bunch of people have tried it and liked it in different forms over the years. It actually goes back to the early 80s in my memory, when I was talking to Joe Harley. This is long, long ago when he was with AudioQuest, but they were developing speaker cables and doing listening tests with speaker cables, and discovered that if they had like multiple cables they were trying to work with, if they didn't disconnect the other set, if they had, say, two sets of cable connected to a speaker, but only one set connected to the amplifier at a time, that it sounded better than when they took off the other set of cables and just had the first ones. And it's like, okay, what's going on? And after some investigation, discovered that it was really more on the ground side, having that extra cable length was doing something to improve the sound. That got, I think, expressed in subsequent AudioQuest speaker cable products, and may have ultimately resulted in their bias, their electrically biased cables and that sort of thing. But it kind of has its genesis going back that far. And then people in the intervening years have made little pigtail devices that are just various materials, wires and whatnot, and like a little 6-inch long kind of bundle, either with just a wire stub out of one end that can be connected, say, to a ground lug on an amplifier, or with a connector of some sort to hook it up. And a lot of people have tried different designs, different mixes of materials. They all report good results, and some of these have turned into products that have been sold for quite a long time. But what happened is that, I don't know, we have to go back 10 years. I'm a little unclear on the time frame, but some people started developing much more elaborate products for this idea of grounding, to provide a better ground point for your system. One of the ultimate expressions of that is from a company called TriPoint, that make incredibly expensive, huge grounding boxes with cables and whatnot. And as absurd as that may seem to a lot of people, they find a market for those products now, a little more down to earth, pardon the expression. There are things like Mtreak and
and then even some active. They have some active ones.
Yeah, that's one I'm blanking on the name of. But there's an expanding range of products.
Nordost has one now, and I think Shinyata just came out with one.
Yeah, Shinyata came out with one recently.
The guy who built his own in Sacramento that I visited, he owned that TriPoint, which I think is north of 50,000. I want to say even like 60, 70, even $80,000.
I want to say he told me 80.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to even use that because it sounds so ridiculous for a grounding box. And what's interesting about him is that he cracks the things open, because, as ridiculous as these price tags are, he can afford to crack them open, and that's what he's done, is basically reverse engineered, created his own in a very attractive chassis. And I got to see the sauce behind what he puts in there. I don't even want to know if he ever sells these, what they would sell for, but that's probably overkill for the majority of people, and going to be out of the price range for more people. But the theory behind it, like you say, is not a lot of basis, but sometimes, and I lean toward being more of a skeptic, because I've tried all these tweaks. I mean, I got some tweaks here that people send me, and I don't even use them because I've gone through them so many times that I kind of know whether I'm going to, enjoy it or not, or have any inclination of it in benefiting me. But one reason why I will give some credence to grounding, I've seen companies that are legitimate, like the Tannoys have used the grounding.
That's a different thing, but okay.
But they've started to pay attention to that, And then on the subject of grounding itself, just in my own experience, and kind of like I did when I started the channel with vibration control, I didn't have this on video, but I used to have ground loop homes. And then the voltage potential between the different chassis and all that definitely improved. This was audible to me easy by running a wire from each chassis together to one point.
Right. Now you're talking about electrical grounding in a more conventional sense. And that's that. I was hoping Rex might join us because he is an expert in that area for home AC wiring and how you do the grounding and what's referred to as bonding. All of those things are critically important for getting a super low noise ground and a low impedance ground connection to ground, literal ground. And Rex has a very good handle on all of that sort of thing. And when he works on people's home electrical systems, that's a big part of what he's paying attention to. And all of that is critically important for best performance from an audio system. The things we're talking about as ground enhancers don't fall into that category. They work however it is they're working. It has nothing to do with home electrical ground wiring and the potential interpotential between the different pieces of equipment.
But indirectly, it is bringing a wire from each piece of equipment to a central point.
That's true in some cases. It's true of my AC Nexus. It's true of the TriPoint. I guess it's true of the Shanyata piece and others, where they do give you the ability to create a star center ground for your whole system. That's a pain in the butt to deal with, but if you're willing to do it and run independent wires from your various pieces of equipment to that can result in a nice net improvement sonically. And you mentioned the speakers. This is something that we've brought up before, where Tidal out of Germany adds that to their speakers, and I was quite amazed by what I heard from that. Tannoy apparently gives you this ground, and what they're doing is they're allowing you to connect the internal metal structure, all of the various metal bits and pieces in a speaker, to an external ground, and that made a really substantial difference with the Tidal Akiras in Rick Brown's system out here. That was a fascinating A/B demo to do, because it sounded much less realistic, and the imaging in particular sounded more vague and less focused without that. As soon as we added that ground connection, it was like bam, snap those things into focus. So I keep urging any speaker manufacturers who are listening to add that capability, because when you're like designing and building a speaker, you can do that without too much trouble. Whereas trying to go back and do it after the fact it can be very difficult.
Well, speaking of which, doesn't that guy Nathan
Nathan Vanderstoep?
He was doing that for YGs and he used to work for YG.
Yeah, and he used to work for YG and had YGs. And they're, of course, a solid aluminum cabinet, so
it makes it even more
sense. It was easy enough to connect a grounding wire to the entire speaker, and beyond that, even things like equipment racks that are made of metal. Any of these, if there's a structure that's made of metal, you can include that in these grounding schemes. And I do feel that there's a benefit to be had there. I think it reduces just the noise floor of the system, even though the noise may not be obvious noise that we are consciously hearing as noise. When you bring the potential, the whatever electrical potential there is on those things down to a good ground level, 0 volt reference ground, that cleans up things sonically. So it's worth doing, but it's one of those things that is an exercise in it's a much more advanced tweaking exercise for people that really want to get involved in dialing in
Right.
their equipment.
I mean, I've seen enough, at least on that star grounding with my own experience and stuff, that I'll at least entertain it, because I think, yeah, the more nebulous subjective benefits you talk about don't have as much to do with some science and measurement results, but there are some potential benefits regardless if it is providing star ground. And I did have a little bit of taste of it at Robert's house. And again, with that box, I will probably get as good a grounding box as you can make, at least with his engineers that he hired and his reverse engineering of very high-end
Right.
pieces that he
And
bought. It should be.
I hope you do that. I think you'll find that there's a benefit to be had, that, it is worthwhile. As you've pointed out, he's reverse engineered maybe the tri-point pieces, but what he's come up with is kind of on the same level of quality of engineering that they have. So it would be a very expensive piece of equipment if he sold them at retail.
I don't know firsthand, but I would argue probably, if I had to bet money, he's probably put more in R&D and invested prior to creating this grounding box than anybody. And certainly from an aesthetic standpoint, this thing is beautiful. It's a piece of art.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to try it.
And as you said, to him, it was more of a personal interest. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was curious. All these devices, all these boxes that that you guys have mentioned, like, I'm curious of their benefit, and how much work they'll actually do if you have let's say a lesser quality ground to your main panel. So essentially you've got a star ground on your panel, your electrical panel. So
right.
So if you have a subpar or a high capacitance ground to the actual ground rod on your home, do any of these boxes is it even gonna make any difference?
My answer is yes. But I see that it's a different thing. We talk about them as ground and ground enhancers because they are typically connected to the ground portion of the system. And if they give you multiple connections where you can make a star ground independent of the AC grounding, that's a different thing that does, you can talk about that in sort of electrical engineering terms in a way that makes sense. But just taking one of these devices and connecting it to, say, the ground on the amplifier chassis and hearing some improvement from that, there's no good engineering rationale for why that would be true.
So these boxes, for instance, this one of Robert's, and all these others, do they shunt the ground back to the AC, to the panel, the electrical panel, through the home wiring?
No, these are all in addition to existing wiring, whatever's there in the AC system to provide grounding. These are all in addition to that. They are independent of that.
They don't tie them back to the star ground of your panel, for instance, or like plug them into like a wall outlet, for instance, and then let that pass back through the bus bar in your panel.
Well, I mean, if you put it on the ground of a piece of equipment, there may be a connection back to the AC wiring, earth ground. So it does, some of these will ultimately be connected to the master AC system earth ground. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is they do things sonically. They provide benefits independent of that for reasons that I can't answer. I don't know. I've heard various people talking about the mechanisms they think are involved in why they would have any beneficial effect sonically. Mm-hmm. But I certainly don't claim to know. I don't know. All I know is that, when I connect these devices to my system, I hear an improvement that I think is worthwhile.
That's great. I know Robert mentions that his grounding boxes, they work on 5 different 5 different levels or 5 different planes of grounding or principles of grounding or whatever, and all these other boxes and devices that he has investigated. They really only visit one specific area, 1 or 2 specific areas of grounding. So
Okay.
I'm not an electrical engineer, so I can't really answer to that, but it was just sparks of curiosity.
Yeah, it's definitely
It's a
not
very
something.
curious thing. Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants to prioritize a grounding box over room treatments, getting your gear right, set up, all of the things that make probably a much more tangible benefit. But when you get into the esoteric tweaks, then you start prioritizing which ones you want to do,
Right.
whether it's cables, vibration control, stuff like that, contact enhancers, doohickeys that you can put on your speakers and
Right.
stuff. You know, I've at least seen enough to and heard enough to at least explore it and entertain that test that Robert's going to send me, and the test I saw at his house, and just the beautiful workmanship and learning
Sure.
more is something that, at least if it makes a difference, I want to be on the forefront of, you know, and I've heard enough from you, people I trust, and seen it in action in other people's systems. So we'll see in the future. And again, Ryan, you know, when you come down, we'll be able to probably showcase a lot of these things that you're interested, as well as me, with Bach SP, grounding, and other things as well. But you know, that pretty much covers. I know we're at an hour. I didn't want to take too much of your time. I wanted to make sure we covered everything that was on the agenda. Anything more from you, Ryan?
No, I think we covered it. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to preview for all the viewers, again, number one, if you join the membership section, the benefit is Steve and myself, Ryan, a bunch of others, Rex, are in that every day in the WhatsApp. You can have these same interactions with us real time and get more details. So just wanted to plug that. But also Ryan has a phenomenal room built from scratch, great gear. He's got those Technique speakers, which I would arguably
Oh,
put
yeah,
out
cool.
there with the YG that I just featured. I'd put him up there with the Rockport Cygnus, in fact. But he's got those. He's got a rail stack. He's got great gear, associated gear. It's got one of my servers as well. We're definitely going to feature Ryan as soon as we can coordinate time when he's in town and can be in his room, showcasing that room in the near future, but also getting him down here and make sure everybody gets introduced to him. He's a cool audiophile, as well as all the other friends that you've seen in prior Zooms. So just wanted to give a shout out to everybody there. Shout out to the subscribers. And thank you, Steve, for again sharing your thoughts and expertise with us.
Very welcome. And let me just echo the point that you made, where things like these ground enhancing devices that we're talking about, they're way down the list of priorities when it comes to setting up your equipment and getting the best from your system. It's, you know, that's in the realm of tweaks that I think are worthwhile, but all the other basics need to be covered first. They're not a Band-Aid. They don't fix any problems. But under the right circumstances, when everything is working really well in your system, they can provide some additional, you know, sonic benefit that I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, so we'll be exploring that again in the near future. So hope everybody enjoyed. If you did, sign up, subscribe, and we'll see all of you guys back here soon.
Very good. Thanks.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks,
Ryan.
guys. Yes, sir.